What's going on, everybody? It's Dan here, back with another Moonshine Talking, and today, like I promised, gonna get into an Iced Earth album ranking. Not gonna spend a whole lot of time with my usual banter beforehand, but I will tell you a couple funny things. I was at work yesterday, and somebody told me, "Oh, your beard is pretty," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I've never been told I'm pretty before, but thank you." And she tells me, "Oh, well, your beard's glorious." I was like, "All right, I'll take it." Uh, It's kind of a lousy day here in Tampa today. It's a little overcast. It's been raining a little bit, but it's been kind of sunny recently, so it's kind of that's how things work around here. It's just how the weather is this time of year. But anyhow, without going into too much silly banter, yeah, I want to talk about Iced Earth. Iced Earth is one of those bands. They're a power metal, uh, traditional metal kind of thrashy band from originally from Indiana, and then their credit is later being from Tampa, Florida. They started in 90 or not 90, 1988. They were around before that in a couple different iterations. The Rose originally, then Purgatory was another version of the band, and then they had to change the name because I guess multiple people had the name Purgatory. You go on Metal Archives, there's like 4 or 5 different bands with the same name. They tried to get around it by throwing a 60 in there, but that didn't work. So then they eventually changed their name to Iced Earth. The band itself is primarily led by the rhythm guitar player, backing vocalist, sometimes does vocals on certain songs, John Schaefer. John Schaefer has been the one single member that's been in the band throughout the entire thing, its entire time since its inception. This is his baby. This is his band. Uh, just a disclaimer ahead of the before we do anything. If you're coming here and you're trying to hear me wax idiotic or philosophical or intellectual about any of the stuff that he was involved with politically and all that sort of thing that happened a few years ago. Uh, I'm not going to do that. I have my opinions on things. I have my opinions on a lot of things that I don't share with people. This isn't the purpose of my channel. It's not the point of the exercise. I'm here to talk about the band. I'm here to do an album ranking. I'm not here to talk about all that stuff. So if you're here for that, go find someplace else. There's plenty of channels that you'll find people discussing all of that one way or the other, and you can go there and find that. So if that's what you're here for, once again, it was nice seeing you. Come back for the next one. But beyond that, this is about the music. I'm not here for all that other stuff. You can get that other places. So anyhow, so that's that. We'll get that out of the way. Um, Give me 1 second. It's like a kick-ass workout today, so I'm all pumped up and feeling good. But yeah, so to get into the albums themselves, they've got a they've got a large body of work altogether. They also have numerous lineup changes. Trying to go through all the different lineup changes and all the reasons for it is kind of exhausting. Sometimes in doing research on the band itself, Schaefer's kind of I don't know, he just kind of seems like he's difficult to work with, if nothing else. And that seems to be the case as far as why there's so many lineup changes and different people in the band, some of which I'll try to remember to get into. But again, they have an exhaustive body of work. They have about 15 full lengths. They've got a couple live albums. Live in Athens is probably the most notable that I can think of off the top of my head. EPs, compilations, box sets, all that sort of stuff. But for the purposes of what I'm doing, we're just sticking to the full lengths. And I'll also note that there was a full length that they put out probably last year or maybe this year. I'm not quite certain. Uh, I'm not quite certain of the date, but it's called a narrative soundscape. We'll just start off with that's going to be my least favorite because I'm not into all the spoken word stuff and the like poetry and redoing songs in some sort of like ambient noise background. and then doing poetry versions of the lyrics. That's just, to me, that's kind of lame. So we'll just start right off out of the gate that A Narrative Soundscape will be, to me, the worst album they've done. Um, I'll kind of also do a little bit of spoilers. I'm not really big into all the remakings and the reworkings of all of the various albums that they've done and songs and everything, because they've had a bunch of different lineup changes, some of which were vocalists, and Schaefer would go into the studio with the new band and he'd redo some of the songs with the new vocalist. And it's just, I don't know. That's kind of like, almost feels like, that's what I say. It's kind of like him being a bit difficult to work with, where you're just trying to get out of your contract. And so you're putting out all these albums with different people doing the same songs you've done previously. And it just seems like just a way to put material out there to kind of fulfill your obligations and then try to either get a new deal or go someplace else or whatever the case is. So I'm not really a big fan of that. I bought Hell Rider and I was all excited because it was what I thought was going to be new Iced Earth. And then it turned out a lot of the stuff was Tim Owens doing a bunch of the stuff that Matt Barlow had done previously. And I was like, all right, this kind of blows, but it's neither here nor there. We'll get to that in a little bit. But that one really, that didn't even make my list as far as stuff goes, because it's not really not a proper full length, and it's not really a lot of new material. But if we were to count it, it would probably be just a step above A Narrative Soundscape. So yeah, let's get into this because this is a lot of albums. So I'm gonna probably recording wise, I'm going to chop this up a little bit just so it's not eating up so much space and memory on my computer, and then we'll go from there. But this will be a full thing for everybody watching it, so I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, so let's go. Um, First album is the self-titled Iced Earth. This came out in November of 1990. The band itself was Gene Adam, who had came over with John from the previous Purgatory, Randy Shawver on lead guitar, John Schaefer, of course, on rhythm guitar and did some vocals. Dave Abell was on bass, and Mike McGill was on drums. It's a good first album. It had 8 tracks, 44 minutes long. It was on Century Media. That's who, for the most part, with a couple exceptions later in their career, that's who they're with most of the time. Uh, and as far as the songs go, yeah, you can check out the band on the back, but it's good. It's decent. I would say probably Iced Earth, the track itself, is probably the strongest one on the album. Followed up by probably When the Night Calls, or When the Night Falls, excuse me. And then probably Colors, maybe. But I'll be honest, I ranked this a 3 out of a 5, but I listened to it multiple times, and a couple of times recently when I was listening to it, it was kind of one of those deals where I was falling asleep listening to it. So it was good, but it was so relaxing that it was putting me to sleep. So it was just kind of like in the middle of the thing. It was just kind of like the middle part of the album. I started fading with it each time. So that's what I thought about that one. But it was good. I would say that Gene Adam, his vocals, they're not the strongest. And then doing my research, what I gathered is that John Schaefer, for the next album, he wanted him to go get some vocal lessons, and he refused, so he got kicked out of the band. And that's when they came up with Night of the Storm Rider, which is this one right here. This one came out also on Century Media. It came out in November 11th of 91, and replacing Gene Adam on vocals was John Greeley. Uh, of course, John Schaefer was there. Randy Shawver was still there. Dave Abell. They replaced Mike McGill with, I'm going to try to pronounce his name properly, but Ricky Secchiari. Hopefully I said that right. And this one's really good. I really enjoyed this one. Um, it has a ton of really good songs on it. I think that John Greeley's vocals were a lot stronger than Gene Adams on it. and they have a lot of classic songs on there: Storm Rider, Desert Rain, Angels Holocaust, Traveling Stygian, Pure Evil. It's a very good album. Like a lot of stuff, I should probably say this. A lot of what I enjoy of Iced Earth is that they have lots of very epic choruses, very meaty, chuggy riffs. A lot of their stuff is very bombastic, for lack of a better way of describing it. And to me, they're like one of those bands that they were made for Dynamo. They were made for grass pop, or like friggin' Hellfest. I think is that the one in France. But just like those big, gigantic, particularly the European super shows, the festivals that they have. This is the type of band that those sorts of things were designed for. Just these very grand, epic songs, lots of sing-alongs, anthemic lyrics, just a lot of stuff you can just raise your fist to and sing along to, and shout to the heavens and all that sort of thing. That's kind of what I love about Iced Earth. That's what I love about the musicianship, and the song structures, and just the way that it's presented. The lyrics are always real cool. Lots of stuff with monsters, and we'll get into it later, but lots of fantasy lyrics, and um, just a lot of stuff like that. So that's kind of like, if you're wondering why I would even bother doing a thing on Iced Earth, that's why. That's what I love about the band. That's why they're one of my favorites. Uh, but yeah, and this one is a good example of it. This is when you kind of start to really see see them starting to come into their own a little bit, starting to really develop as a band. And this one, again, I think I already said it, but it was a 4 out of 5. It's got 9 tracks on it, 46 minutes long. And then, apparently, as is a common theme with the band, John Greeley wasn't in the band too much longer. And they wound up, this is when I would say, for me at least, this is probably my favorite era of the band, is when they started with Matt Barlow. And he replaced John Greeley. And this is the first album he was on, Burnt Offerings, also on Century Media. It came out in March of 95. 8 tracks, 52 minutes long. They have, like I said, Matt Barlow, Randy Shaver is still in the band, David Bell. They replaced the drummer Rodney Beasley, end up replacing Ricky Secchiari, and it's good. It's not. It, it's a decent album. I'd probably again give it like a 3 out of 5, but it's not the strongest thing that they did when you think about the Matt Barlow era of Iced Earth. Matt has just a phenomenal voice. For me, he's got that nice mix of like raspy and very operatic. Like he can his highs are ridiculous, and but it's still got this like raspy grit to it that really kind of, it gives it a little bit more of like a grimy sound. Like, it's still kind of like street level, for lack of a better way of describing it. And that's what I enjoy about his vocals. But he has just a phenomenal voice, and to me, he's one of the better vocalists in metal. I don't know what a lot of other people think, but for me, my money, he's one of the best ones in the business. He actually, it'll come up later, but he left the band because he ended up joining the Department of Homeland Security, and then he wound up becoming a police officer for Georgetown PD. And that all happened after the towers fell in New York, and I think he kind of like wrestled with the idea. It's kind of a dilemma for him to stay in the band or leave, and then eventually he did. But so I mean, it kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but yeah, as far as songs, I'd say. Uh, Burnt Offerings, the title track was good. It was fine. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing. Uh, Burning Oasis, it had its moments, and then Creator Fail. That was probably the strongest track on the album. That's like when you listen to that, it's like, all right, now we're talking. If you know enough Iced Earth, you're like, okay, now this is really good. And then we get this one. We get in May 20th, 96. They put out Dark Saga, also on Century Media. This one's really cool. They used Todd McFarlane's Spawn character, and it was a concept album based on the Spawn comic book character graphic novel. Uh, it's 10 tracks, 43 minutes long. This one is 5 out of 5 for me. This is one of the first. This is probably the first full length that I heard of theirs, and probably one of the first songs that I ever, not probably the first song I ever heard from them was I Die For You. I heard it on a compilation that Century Media put out. I was broke as a joke back in '98, but I happened to be able to scrape up enough money to get a compilation at one of the local record stores. The Ice Earth track was on them, amongst other things, and I just fell in love with the band. I actually first became aware of them. I was around the same time, 97, 98. I was going to Malenko's, and I would get off the bus because I didn't have a car, because again, broke as a joke. And I got off there. I got off close to where the school was, but I would go to the Gold's Gym before I would go to the school. And right in the same plaza, there was a little comic book store. And I walked in one day and they had some cool stuff. They had like a Cthulhu figurine, a couple other things, but near the front counter, they had a little display where they had Iced Earth. They had an Iced Earth album. And it just kind of drew me in, like the design of the artwork on it. And it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I didn't really know what they were, who they were. And that's kind of when I first became aware of them. And then that's when I actually that was the first time I heard a song of theirs. So if you want the origin story of how I actually got into them, that's it. Um, but yeah, this one is killer. I mean, it's got so many good tracks on it. Starts off great with Dark Saga, I Die For You, The Hunter, uh, Question of Heaven. The last three tracks on it, they're kind of like a. This is kind of where you start getting into a staple of Iced Earth. They do lots of like trilogies or like songs where they're combining them, and there's like a theme to it that you kind of have to follow along with, like an overarching story to the stuff that they do. But yeah, this one's great. This one I definitely consider if you're going to get into Iced Earth. I consider this essential. Plus, it's Spawn. Spawn is badass. I'm not a comic book guy or anything like that. I'm not really huge into comic books, but Spawn to me is probably the most metal comic book character that's out there. I mean, friggin' guy goes to hell and strikes a deal with the devil to come back and get revenge on people. So that I mean, that's as badass as you can get as far as stuff like that would go. So anyhow, so now we're getting the first one that I was talking about earlier. This is Days of Purgatory. Speaking of the story I just told you, this was the album that was sitting in the comic book store when I went in there at the time, was Days of Purgatory. You might be asking yourself, well, why are you showing some of these things in jewel cases and some of them not? That's a long story. I have one of those giant books with CDs in them. A long time ago, I tried to save space in my apartment, and the dumbass that I am, I got rid of a lot of the back sides of the inserts of the CDs, which I'm kicking myself in the ass for nowadays. So I have these giant booklets. So a lot of stuff I don't have in jewel cases, and I've got a bunch of ICER stuff that are in those that little CD booklet. So anyhow, that's the story there. If you're wondering what's going on there. Days of Purgatory was a bunch of reworked stuff from the previous albums, from Night of the Storm Rider, Iced Earth, the self-titled. They did some Enter the Realm, the demo that they had first put out, and it's all stuff that they have Matt Barlow doing the new vocals on. It's got, of course, John Schaefer. Uh, Brent Smedley is their drummer on this one. Randall Shaver's still lead guitar on it. Uh, you're gonna have to give me a second. McDonough, James McDonough takes over on bass, and of course John Schaefer is there. Uh, it's good. It's a 15 tracks, 74 minutes. Again, 3 out of 5, but I'm not really a huge fan of the redoing stuff to redo it. It just, I don't know. I just don't like it. It's just something I'm not really a big fan of. I will say that some of the songs that they redo, like When the Night Falls, or even Desert Rain, having Matt Barlow do the vocals on them does make a world of difference in making the strength of the songs a lot more powerful, giving it a little bit more heft because he's got such a powerful voice that you can definitely see the difference in quality and talent between Gene Adam and Matt Barlow. I mean, Matt Barlow is kind of up here, and Gene Adams kind of like maybe he should have taken the vocal lessons. I don't know, but yeah, that was that, and we're gonna pause for a second because I'm gonna break this up into parts.